Most businesses talk about marketing. How do we market better? How do I explain what I do? What do I do to make sure my content is connecting? Why is my social not working? What is the deal with these ads I'm running? But what if the issue isn't the messaging or even the marketing? What if the issue comes down to leadership? How you're leading yourself and how you're leading others? Because the truth is, confusing messaging usually comes from unclear thinking. And today's guest is Jim Carbaugh. He's a speaker, educator, leadership guide who's committed to helping individuals and organizations to build strong, values-driven cultures. With a background in education, he's a registered Maine guide and outdoorsman. He brings a practical, real-world lens to leadership development. He's the creator of the Learn framework, which we're going to actually talk about on today's episode, which equips schools and organizations with a clear, repeatable foundation for positive climate and culture change. He's the co-founder of the Teach Forward Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering educators and leaders to create lasting impact. He's also the author of the graphic novel, The Shop Secret, and he's preparing to release his upcoming book, Learn, a transformative educational framework that inspires character, resilience, and leadership. As a TEDx speaker and thought leader, Jim challenges others to lead with character and purpose in a chaotic world. Here is my conversation with Jim Carbaugh. Welcome to Brand on the Rocks, the podcast that distills bold ideas into clear messages you can actually use. Each week, we serve up conversations, audits, and straight pours of insight to help you cut through the noise and grow your business. Hosted by brand strategist Ryan Holck, this is where clarity comes neat and your brand gets remembered.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the invite.
Hey, it is so great to have you. I know we've connected a couple times online and talked through some of your website and your messaging and things, and I've been seeing a pattern in business leaders and in entrepreneurs. And when I thought about the pattern, I thought of you. And that was that we tend to get so focused on how do we market our message? How do we get what we do out into the world that we don't always do a great job of leading ourselves and leading our teams. And I thought of you as someone who has spent a good portion of their life trying to figure out how to lead teams well. So I'd love to talk about that today.
Oh, great. Well, I appreciate that. That's my sweet spot. But then after this is all over, you and I will talk about how I get my message out better.
All right. Totally fine with that.
I got
totally
the leading part down, no, that's, yeah, that's, it's funny. I'm so blessed to have this method. And everyone, it's funny, people talk about, oh, well, you developed this method. Well, I did, but I didn't, and you probably remember the story, but my grandfather sat down with me with a week and I worked with him and he gave me his words of wisdom. And it was at a really crucial time in my life. And it was like one of those things I said, wow, that really resonated. And as I've gone through life, it's just gotten more and more intense with me. And I've used it with a leadership team. I've used it with sports teams. Obviously, it'll really link in with schools, but I've also had the opportunity to share it with other leaders and, people who have businesses and their business teams. And, I call it my Learn framework. And it's funny. I think there's 5 things you need to be able to do. And if you really, really think about it, and when we talk about what's going on today, there's too many times I'm sitting in a room with somebody, I'll say, wow, man, if they just would learn, there wouldn't be a problem, and so we know the acronym LEARN stands for listen, ethics, attitude, respect, and know. And those 5 things as a person and as an organization, if you can define them and get them where they need to be, honest to goodness, I know you're going to be successful. I've done that with sports teams that weren't doing very well when I went in to coach them. And I use those as my guardrails and realizing that we need to listen. We need to have ethics, attitude, always, and that's what's great about attitudes right in the middle, because without a good attitude, none of that stuff's going to work, and then respect and then know. And know's the big one. We'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, those 5 things, it's what you need. Now, the part is the hard part And where I come in and helping and coach people through that is we got to make sure that those 5 things with everyone that's on the team, in the team with the leadership team, wherever it might be, and yourself are all defined the way they need to be defined. And what that comes down to, when you look at successful businesses and you look at successful teams and everything else, I mean, you look back even at some of these sports teams that won Super Bowls and stuff, they have 3 things in common. They have a common language. And when you hear them interview, they'll call. I mean, we can look at the team that just won the national championship. Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw Coach Signetti talk, it almost got to the point where it was a broken record. It was all the time. And there's one thing that stuck in my mind. Every play has a life of its own. He just kept saying that. And it's true because he didn't want them to get focused in on that play to mess up the next play. Right. So but when you heard the kids talk, the players, there were the same thing. So you got to have that common language. And the other thing is you got to have common systems. So throughout your departments, throughout your whole organization, the systems have to be common. You can't have one department running on a certain way and another department another way. And, it's kind of like the offense and defense are separate, but they still have to have common systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to have people who celebrate it. Right. You've got the leadership has to celebrate the fact that we've got a common language, common systems, and hopefully everyone in the organization is celebrating it. But when you look at a lot of organizations, teams, and everything, those 3 things exist, period. And learn accentuates those. And learn is great in the fact that if we can get everyone to understand what listening is, because it's too often people say, yeah, I'm listening, but Ryan, they're not hearing you. There's a difference, right? I can listen to something, somebody can listen to the music and you can go, well, did you hear that lyric? No, they didn't. See, they're not really listening. And that's actually an activity we can do where we can play a song and then you ask people to recite the lyrics and you can just see people even if it's one they knew, there could be an old song that somebody, I never knew they said that in that song.
Right. I feel that as a musician deeply. Feel it.
Yeah. So, listening is very important. Now, so we define what listening looks like when we're on our teams. And that's to each other. And that's where leadership, and I'll be honest with you, for the team to be successful, we have to have a personal meter inside us to listen to ourselves because our guidance to ourselves, and let's face it, you talk to yourself more than you talk to anybody in the entire world. So self-talk is important. So you want to make sure that's positive, but you want to make sure that you're listening. Like if you have that, what they call that gut feeling, right? If you have that, then we have to have an atmosphere where we're safety enough, trustworthy enough that we can express that. Here's what I'm hearing. And here's what I'm feeling. And here's what I'm getting out of that. And one of the activities that I've done with people is to make sure people are listening is when you're in a meeting, and we did this in several meetings, but when you're in my leadership team is if we're discussing an idea and somebody say, well, I think we should be doing this. And you want to add your idea, or you think maybe you have a better idea, I would ask you to summarize their idea first before you add to it.
Ooh, that's a rule that I learned in peer counseling, like in high school, college, but that's a phenomenal way to know. Okay. So if I repeat back, where does that go from there? Like what's,
well, again, if you have an idea and we're in the meeting and I'm going, man, I like Ryan's idea. I think it's really a neat idea to do this, but I would add, or maybe what if we thought about doing it this way? So I've acknowledged you. I've told you that I've heard you, and I'm not just trying to upscale you. And then as a group, and that allows us to get that more blended idea, as opposed to me just trying to sell politic my idea, which we see too often in the world anymore, as opposed to someone saying, well, that's a really good way, but you know what? Here's something I think we could add to it. So you're acknowledging it. And when you talk about a dynamics of a leadership team, that can be very important because we all know the politics behind that. And again, when I had a coaching staff of 5, 6, 7 people, someone might say, hey, I think we should be running these plays against the team. Somebody could say, hey, you know what? I agree with you. But as I've looked at film, I think maybe this is going to work too. So then as a head coach, now I make those final decisions, but now everybody's been heard. We're listening, but see, we've been heard.
So I love that idea. The part of me goes back to the teams that I've been on that have struggled, not so much with being heard, but with consensus and coming to agreement in that listening process. So what are some of the tools or the ways that you help a team go, okay, it's one thing to hear the words come out of your mouth and be able to repeat them, but like, how do I live with that tension of my rules or my thoughts are maybe not the ones that are going to get picked? So like, how do I have that team mindset in the process even?
Yeah, I'm going to be a little harsher. Get over yourself.
That's
I mean,
that's
no,
fair.
no. I mean, let's face it. That's what you want in a team is you want everyone to have their say,
Mhm.
and ultimately, as a leader, someone has to make that decision. But you have to make. I mean, we have to be comfortable with the fact that we were heard and acknowledged. And one of my rules has always been don't sit back and not say something because you think your idea is not going to be said, because the last thing you ever want to hear from anybody is, well, I knew that was going to happen, or, we could have. No, we got to get it out, but we have
Mm.
to be mature enough. And that's just going through the team process and having trust and realize that not everybody's idea is going to be used. And I think as a leader, the other thing to tune in on is look at people who tend to be silent,
Mm.
because you're going to always have your extroverts and your introverts in the meeting. So don't be afraid. And I've done this several times. Don't be afraid to step around the conversation later, maybe later in the day, maybe the next morning. I did this when I had teacher teams. I'd run into a teacher and say, hey, man, what'd you think of the meeting yesterday? I
Mm.
noticed you didn't have a whole lot to say. What did you think of, and kind of just bring up those ideas. And then when the person's not around there and they feel like they're competing, they all of a sudden start letting loose and say some things, or they might say, hey, you know what? I heard what Tom was saying, but by golly, I've tried that and it doesn't work. Here's what I have found to work. And then again, as a leader, you need to be able to make those calls and acknowledge them and say, well, next time maybe speak up. And they may never,
Yeah.
but they're a valued person. And I have found that over time, when you acknowledge people like that away from the group,
Mhm.
eventually they do start to speak up because they realize that you're an ally. You're not there to beat them down. And again, if that's the kind of leader you are, then I don't know that I can help. You know?
Mm. Right.
But I think that, you think about it. We, with all the noise that happens in the world, are people really listening? I mean, we got to listen.
Mm.
We got to tune out all the noise. And it's been great to see a lot of companies and stuff have the no cell phone rule. They have the basket when you walk into the meeting, because again, you've seen it. I've seen it at restaurants. You see people sitting there waiting for their meal, and they're not even talking. They're just on their phones. My wife and I have a rule: phones. We go out. We're not. I mean, if we can't talk to each other, let's just stay home and go watch TV in a separate room or something. And I find it laughable at this point that we have all these schools that are now come up with all these policy, no cell phones during the day, and they're spending all kinds of money they're getting these lockers and they're high, and then now they're doing studies so quickly. They're doing studies that kids, academics are going up. Well, no kidding. I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm old enough to know that sometimes when the guy was outside mowing the grass, the teacher walked over and closed all the blinds in the door or in the windows because we would look at the person mowing the grass instead of paying attention to math. Take away the distraction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mean that to insult anybody, but I had a middle school that I ran and we had a policy. We didn't even have it written down. We just said phones are off and out of sight, guys. You're 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. Nobody's that important. Nobody.
Mm.
And I would tell them you'll never see me on my cell phone. And if I am, that someone's called me, that it's important, the superintendent or somebody, and I had it in my pocket, but you're not going to see me at lunch scrolling through and coming over and showing people videos. It's just not going to happen. Now I got to model that. Right.
Right.
So, yeah. So, you get the listening part, but there's several other crucial ones in there. When you look at learn, the second one is ethics. And this is the one that you have to do pre to the meeting. This is one where I sit down with people, and what we have to do is each person, if we're just on a team, it's an administrative team. Now I've done this with a whole group of teachers where we've broken them up and make groups and so forth. But you know what? We write down and we say, what are our top 3 to 5 values? What are the things we
Mm.
value? There are things that we would call our definers. trustworthiness, whatever it might be, all that stuff. So we write those top 3 down, and then we put them on a board. I call it a splash board. We put them on a board, and you'll find out that everyone in the room usually has 1 to 2 exactly the same. So then we determine that, hey, as a group, again, we got to have common language. As a group, here are our common values. Here's our ethics. So we're in this meeting. This is our ethics. This is what it matters. So they don't have to be said anymore. And I've got some places now in our schools, we'd have them up on the wall. You could do that in your meeting room. And it's just a reminder, because we've all agreed on it. I mean, it always amazes me that when you do that, there are people who share values, but then somebody will, well, they don't get along. Well, if they share the values, why don't they get along? Again, it's pecking order. We got to get over that.
That's interesting, because there's a phrase that I've helped a lot of nonprofits over the years, and there's a phrase that it's one thing for it to be on the wall, it's another thing for it to actually be part of essentially the culture and the way you live. And one of the challenges that I keep seeing with leaders is we'll establish those values, and they're important to us. They may be important to the core team at the moment they're established. But a year from now, a couple team members have turned over, and there's, in the school setting, teachers retire and somebody else takes their place. How can you help people who are new into your culture, your system, come on board with those established ethics that you said? This is what defines us, the values that we feel like are important. Like, how do you make sure that you keep building it so that they're on board?
I'd make it my interview process.
Oh. Okay. Now, I think I see where you're going.
If I'm going to interview you, Ryan, I'm going to look at you and say, hey, I'm going to slide you a piece of paper and say, there's 3 words down there. Tell me what they mean to you and how do you hold them? Now, it's not good. Now, if you're the best person I'm looking for, it's not going to stop me from saying I need to hire Ryan. Okay. But it's going to give me an idea where you're at. And then that's going to be a conversation. If you end up being the candidate, it's going to be a conversation that, hey, I remember those words I handed you. Those are our core values. They're out there for a reason. Because you're right. Too many people have mission statements, vision statements, but there isn't anybody in the organization that can repeat it.
Yep.
And if you can't repeat it, what's it matter? But I can guarantee you people can remember 3 to 5 words. And again, the important part of that is once we find those 3 to 5 words, if you talk about trustworthiness, we then need to define what does that look like as a building, as a group, as a team, because your idea of trustworthiness and my idea of trustworthiness might not quite be the exact same definition. So let's talk about what that means.
Right.
Okay. That's the most extensive part of the learn is getting that ethics and those values down. Because everyone already has preconceived. And again, you get a lot of, like when I deal with schools, you get people coming, well, we don't want to do this, and it ends up ruining our mission and vision statement. Well, let's look at your mission and vision statement. Mm-hmm. Are there words in there? And are we living them? I mean, we all know somebody, I was told several years ago, somebody said, if somebody keeps telling you, hey, trust me, I'm telling you the truth, you might want to start thinking about whether they are or not. If you have to keep telling people, trust me, then there's a problem there. Maybe there isn't, but that's the toughest part in the learn process is getting the ethics, the values. But again, it's the most important part. And when you think again, if I think about our where our tensions are coming from in our society right now, it's all ethical.
Mm-hmm.
It's all values.
It totally is.
And because we've lost our definition. And we're not listening to people. People aren't listening. It's just that gets into the next thing is you get into attitude. And the biggest thing I can say about attitude is you've got to remember this: attitude is not an emotion. It's a choice.
Oh.
Attitude,
it's how you show up.
Attitude is a choice. It's not an emotion. So when someone says to me, I got a bad attitude because I had a bad drive into work or this, no. See that you have an emotional reaction to what happened. That doesn't put you in a bad. You chose to have a bad attitude. that happened to you,
Mm.
you can remember it. You write down the license plate number. I don't give a hoot, but don't come in and ruin my Cheerios because somebody cut you off, because it happens to everybody.
Everyone.
But it's a choice. Your attitude is a choice, and that's a big one. It's just not, and people sometimes go, well, I don't like that. Well, it's not an emotion. It's a choice. You're letting emotions make the choice for you. You have to be more mature and control over that. And that's tough for kids. And that's probably one that, when I look at all these, that's one of the bigger lessons that kids get out of doing the learn.
Mm-hmm.
And as adults, we all know that sometimes people, I guess, would call it being triggered. Well, if you have your attitude where it's at, you can't really get triggered because you're grounded in your ethics and you're truly listening about things. Well, then you can't get triggered. You can get upset, right? You can not like what's been said,
Right.
but it shouldn't change your emotion. It shouldn't, or your attitude. It shouldn't change your attitude at all. And when you think of successful people, when something goes wrong, your attitude has to stay positive, not in the fact that it was a bad thing. I mean, I get it. People get a lot. I've had some things happen here recently. I had some friends pass away and stuff. Those are sad things, but I can choose to let that take me down, or I can say, you know what, somebody said, well, you can't have a positive attitude if someone passed away. Well, my positive attitude, my good emotions, I can share with people. Right. It's sad. That's an emotion, but my attitude can be, upbeat.
So how do you teach or grow that in a team?
Well, I think, when you look at a team, and I think back to the teams I coached, and I had some football teams that weren't doing very well, and we had to change the attitude. It's a matter of defining, again, what a positive attitude looks like. It's not dismissing the fact that we lost the game or we didn't play well. It doesn't dismiss the fact of those things, but it's putting it in its proper place.
So it's perspective.
It's perspective, realizing that it isn't until the end of the season, it isn't the end. Until the end of the thing, it isn't the end. So when you look at people about a positive attitude, we got to look at what happened. Okay, you had, when I dealt with educators, okay, you had first period was horrible. Well, that shouldn't ruin the next 4.
Right.
Let's identify why first period was horrible. Maybe it was 2 students, but what didn't I do to handle those 2 students? Maybe I needed to call the principal or the assistant principal and get them removed. Whatever it might have been, but then why didn't I do that? But I can't let that affect. I can't let that determine what my next period is going to be like. It's the old don't let it go spiraling down, right?
Yeah. And your personal responsibility in the choice in the moment.
Yeah, and those are, again, it's maturity in that. It doesn't dismiss what happened. It doesn't dismiss the bad thing. It doesn't dismiss what someone may have done, disrespected you or whatever. But it makes you take a look at, okay, here's what happened. And you see a lot of people. You can admire some people that we see that are public that tend to seem like it just, people, it just rolls off their back. Well, I'm sure they do a lot of reflecting, but at the time they're not going to let, that stuff affect them. And a perfect example with that is when I did coach and I coached the quarterbacks at the college level and at the high school level. That's where I focused on. But, you had to always, I remember telling a head coach when I wasn't a head coach, he was a yeller, and the quarterback would throw an interception. He'd come off and be yelling. I said, you just shut him down for the rest of the game. Every quarterback is going to throw an interception. The key is your attitude. You got to get over it. And you can hear even now announcers, we doesn't look worried. Well, he can't be worried about it. It goes back to what that coach said, Signetti, right? Every play has life of its own. That's attitude.
Yeah.
I can't, golfers are great at it. A golfer can't let the shot they just did ruin the next one they have. They got 4 to get on the green or whatever it is. They got to, and your attitude controls that. And anybody who's played golf probably has let attitude destroy 1 hole, 2 holes.
It's why I don't golf. Let's just say it that way.
I golf, but it's one of those where I catch myself getting in there. You have a bad drive and then you just ruminate over it for the next four holes. And you finally get the hole done. You're going like, what the heck? Why did I do that? I should know better. But it's, again,
I love this part, partly because I see the ripple implications in an organization when you choose not to ignore the reality, but to say, here's who and what we are. Here's the attitude. Here's what we're going to reflect. Here's how, and just what that simple act does in the hallways for people in terms of encouragement, in terms of their willingness to be on this team. I've been on teams where the attitude got poor and everybody was like, why am I here? And on teams where this reality was probably worse, but the attitude was positive, and we're like, it's all right. We have a plan. We got to work the plan. We got to move through. And there is such a important piece for the leader to be thinking about, how do I drive this? How do I, keep this moving? And I love that core idea, especially when you think about quarterbacks and how you're personally engaging with your staff, with your team, with yourself.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, that's none of us. All of us are going to screw up at some point. You got to have,
yeah,
and let's face it, one moment shouldn't define us. Now, obviously, if you continue, if I go out
right.
and throw 4 interceptions, and well, then somebody better put me on the bench. Something's not going right. But yeah, I mean, you make bad decisions in sales or whatever. Well, then we need to find out why. But you're at it. You have to keep that positive attitude, because guess what? If you go down that rabbit hole and get a negative attitude, your next sale probably is not going to go well.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, and people are going to, and we've all been around people like that where you can read that on them. The energy's not there. Um, and that kind of ties in a little bit with the last letter in the learn when we get to that. But I mean, attitude, the big thing, like I always say, and I repeat it and repeat it, just remember, attitude is not an emotion,
Mm,
and then just separate those two, and you'll find yourself being able to handle an attitude. It's funny, you watch little kids and they can fall down and get up and keep running, man. They just, they're just happy to be. And we need to sometimes be a little bit more like that.
love that.
The next letter, Ryan, just so you know, the next letter is respect. And that kind of just defines itself. It sometimes finds itself in the ethics part, but
Okay.
respect, the respect that I'm talking about is something that's a little deeper than just, as people would say, oh, the golden rule. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the golden rule, but there's a thing out there called the platinum rule. You may have heard of it. And the platinum rule says treat people the way they want to be treated. Okay. Now remember, the golden rule says treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, there's a little coaching tip too. And I actually had an old geezer coach tell me this one time. He said, if you treat every player the way you like to be treated as a player, you're missing 2/3 of your players, because not every kid gets
Mm,
motivated the way you get motivated, right? You don't have to understand how they get motivated. You don't have to understand, but to understand that they don't get motivated. Like, again, some people may want to listen to AC/DC before the game. Well, not everybody wants to. Somebody
right.
may want to bang their head against the wall. We all see no stereotypical movies. Not everybody wants to. Some people like to just sit alone and meditate. Well, that doesn't mean he's not ready for the game. And again, you go back to that coach that liked to yell, and he yelled at the quarterback. Well, again, there may be a quarterback or two out there that just ticks them off and that motivates them. But
Mhm.
typically, because of the thinking that's involved in being a quarterback, they don't want to be yelled at.
Mm,
They want to be, hey, what did you see? They want to know they want somebody on their side. So what did you see on the field to make you throw that? Okay, let's take a look at. That's why you always see them on their iPads in the sidelines and stuff. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to get cerebral about it. Well, if you're screaming and hollering at them, what happens when you scream and holler and get emotional? You don't make good decisions.
oh,
It shuts. You're in the fight or flight at this point, right? So if you respect somebody for the way they want to be respected, and you think about this as a team, that means you need to get to know the people on your team.
oh,
I can't respect you, Ryan, unless I know you. Because if I know you don't like rock and roll, well, then I'm not gonna play AC/DC and just say, well, suck it up. You got to play my way. Um, you know what I mean? So you got
yeah.
to get to know them. So that's the platinum rule says that. The platinum rule just says treat people the way they want to be treated. So you got is if I know someone's an introvert, well, I'm not going to sit in a meeting as a leader and call them out constantly. I'm shutting them down more.
Mm. You have just put so much responsibility on the leader to be aware, not just of what their team is delivering, but on how their team functions.
If you don't know that, then how can you lead them?
Oh,
I mean, you think about that. If I don't,
man.
yeah, and that goes back. If you're the leader, you've got to listen. People talk, and people give you a clue who they are.
Mhm.
And then again, when we do the splash board with the ethics, and you talk about the values, and most teams are not huge, but you think about that. You got 5 people, 6 people in your team. You start thinking about that, and then you come up with your core. But you still know, I still know Ryan had these other 2 that we didn't use, or he had this other one. Well, that kind
Yeah.
of gives me an inside view of where you're at. Doesn't devalue your values. Doesn't say your ethics aren't important, but here's ours as a team. It might be a bonus that you have this extra one. It also gives me a clue into your attitude, because obviously if my values get trampled on, it's probably going to affect
Mm.
my attitude, because it's going to get me emotional. So again, yeah, as a leader, if you're a leader and you have a administrator, you have a team, and you don't know your people on your team, wow, and I've seen that depicted in movies, and you've seen that, where people didn't even know if they had kids or whatever. I mean, it's those kind of things. And
Yep.
if someone's private about that, you can know they have 2 kids. You don't have to. You just realize you don't ask them about it. They don't want to share their home life. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, as a leader, you have to, yeah, I mean, if you don't know your team, and that's where the respect comes in. And
Love
again, obviously, it needs to be vice versa. The team needs to know the leader,
it. Mm.
right? I mean, that's not all just have this go one way. So the team needs to know my values. Okay, they need to know those things, and they also need to respect me for who I am, and what I'm about, and how I tick, and not think that I'm going to tolerate some of their inactions that they know I wouldn't like. So they need to, we need to play along together. We need to get in the sandbox and make sure we're all playing well. The big one I always find, in its 2 parts, is the last letter. It's no. N-O, not K-N-O.
Mhm.
Because we should, but no. Then there's 2 parts of that. Now the first part is pretty easy, and we see this in our world today. It's setting boundaries. We need to know our boundaries personally, and we need to
Mm.
be confident enough to be able to say no to people, even if it's our boss. I'm not, and if it's not, you don't have to do it in front of the group, or just walk in and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm not really comfortable with that.
Mhm.
My values outside that, but we have to keep those boundaries. And too often we see those boundaries getting pushed on people. The other part of that is we are all going to hear no. It's the first word. I've got a grandson that's 16 months old, and he's already heard no more times than he's probably going to ever hear it in the rest of his life. And it's one of the first words we get to know. And I forget the statistic. It was a toddler can hear it up to 250 times within a day, depending on the toddler. But it's somewhere between 50 and 250, depending on the toddler. But it's like you're gonna. And then they went on. They extrapolated. And they said, by the time you're a teenager, you will have heard no this many times.
Mm.
And no becomes that real negative thing in our life, right? I mean, it's one of those things as a kid. I'm going to ask mom because dad always says no. And then mom says, go see dad. Well,
I played that game. I know
yeah,
that game.
yeah, yeah. So, and you're like at war, you try to get ahead of it. I did this, right? Well, I would ask you, but you're just going to say no anyway. trying to play some real cheap psycho games with your parents. But the part about no is you're going to get it. But see, here's what you need to know. You can ask, why did I get it? And I could look at you and say, Ryan, you just said no. Can you please give me some insight to why you felt that way, or why you're giving me a no? Now you might look at me and say, well, I don't really feel comfortable. I just know it's not for me. Well, then I could go back and reflect. Why do I think I got that no? And again,
Mm.
not personally, I got no because he doesn't like me. No. Why do I think I got that no? And then I got to realize, is that no a permanent no? Because they are. And if it is, then guess what? I need to find another avenue. Stop knocking on the door that's never going to open. If it's not a no, then I can work my way around that and figure out, well, okay, what do I need to do to get that into a yes? But there's one thing for sure. You never get to a yes until you confront the no.
Whoa. That is a crazy. Yes. That's an amazing principle. I've seen it. I've lived it. I've never seen it articulated or heard it articulated that way. You never get to the yes. Wow.
I mean, most of your
Yeah.
yeses have come from no's somewhere down the road,
Yeah.
and if it's important enough to you, you'll find a way to get around it. You'll find a way to go, okay, what can I do? And sometimes it's simply asking somebody. I've only have out of all my years of interviewing people and hiring teachers and stuff, honest to goodness, handful, maybe 5 people who would call me back and say, I was in the finalist. Can you give me some insight to where I can improve in my interview process? Instead of going home and ruminate and say, well, they just, no, they wanted to know. And, a lot of times it was experience. Sometimes it might have been, it just wasn't the right fit. You have to understand we were looking for someone, whatever it might be, but you can encourage them. Matter of fact, one of those 5, I ended up calling back 3 days later because I had someone who got married. Then their husband got transferred and they resigned. And I called them back and said, hey, you know what? We need to have a follow-up conversation because the position just opened up. So, yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to ask why to someone. Do you mind can you tell me why you're telling me no? Is there something, that you're not comfortable with or what? And they might say, well, just not right for me now. Okay. And that's not a sales pitch thing. Again, I don't,
No.
that's just, you want to, again, if you're in a meeting with a team and the boss says no, or you go in and meet with your boss because you have this great idea and he says no, hey, can you give me an idea, why is your first response no? What's up? Is it timing? What is it?
And conversely, even outside of the team setting, as an individual, if I can take a step back, process the moment, not with the emotions, but process the moment, why the no, my ability to then figure out what would I need to do differently, how would I pitch it differently. I immediately go to, well, on that sales call, I got to know maybe the product's the problem, maybe the offer's the problem, maybe there was something I didn't know about in the moment that was the reason the no happened. What can I learn from this? Where can I like that.
Yeah. And sometimes you and I both know this. Sometimes no is just timing.
Yes.
And that goes back to, again, if you go back to learn, are you listening? Are you reading people and respecting them? Are you figuring out the moment? Because not every moment's right. And that may very well be. And again, sometimes it's a hard no. And sometimes we have to step back and realize that this isn't going to happen with that person. But the great part is, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just, you can't do it at that time. You can't do it with that person.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just not the, and I've also believed this too. It's a blessing sometimes you get a no, because we're not smart. We think we really need to get something and we don't, and that's good. So the 2 parts of that no, again, is setting your boundaries where you're going to give people no. And that's the other thing I would always suggest to people on teams. And I did a lot to my teachers, that if a kid came and asked you something, gave them a no, give them a reason. Don't give them the, well, because I'm the teacher, or because I'm the boss, I'm the manager, I'm the whatever. What's wrong with saying, no, you know what, Ryan, it's just not the right time. Or, you know what, let's take a look. Or, wow, think of this. No, you're not ready. And that, again, dealing with middle school kids, there are a lot of kids, hey, can I do this? Well, no, you're not just ready to go running down the hallway doing whatever they're going to, whatever it might have been. But yeah, I mean, but if you're going to supply a no, I've always encouraged people to be able to tell somebody why without them even asking. Just say no. And I've done that. People have called upon me to try to sell me stuff, and I'll say, no, you know what? I'm just not going there right now. My business plan doesn't include that. But yeah. I know I'm going to tell you that I'll get back to you if it ever falls in, and you're going to say, yeah, right. But trust me, I'll have you down. And if this is something that I need, I'm going to get back to you because you were the one that reached out to me first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Learn, listen, ethics, attitude, respect, and know. And it's funny. My grandfather, at the end of the week, when I did this with him, and I was working with him in the shop, and he looked at me and said, he told me, he said, if you learn every day, you're going to be fine. And it's funny, if I go through my day, and most people journal anymore. You should journal. If you don't, you go through your day. If you sit back and if you just think of those 5 words and say, okay, what did I hear today? What did I truly hear today? How did it affect me? And then if I say, okay, what values got pressured today, or what did I what values did I display today? And then you talk about, I always do attitude. I always just either make a smiley face, a straight line, or a sad line. And then if I had a bad attitude, I try to write down why I got in a funk and couldn't get out.
Mm.
Why did I let myself get there and just not be able to get out? It's okay. That's the other thing too. You got to tell people it's okay to get a bad attitude for a short moment, or an hour or two, but don't ruminate and be there for all day.
Right.
I mean, we only get so many 24 hours. And then respect. Who did I respect today? Did someone respect me? Did I feel disrespected? Talk about why. And again, you're thinking through that. And then did I get some no's today? And what am I going to do about it? What's my action plan for the no's I got?
I love that.
Yeah.
I have one last question as we kind of wrap this up, because this is, and I appreciate you diving in to these in depth, because I have in your content gone through it really quickly and gone, oh, these are really cool principles. But I love hearing you think about application and how it goes into businesses. But here's my question is, as you think as a leader, as you have this process that you've implemented in your team, is there a intentional way? You just outlined how you process through it for yourself. Is there an intentional way that you have processed through how your team is doing in these efforts, and as they're moving forward, like on a daily basis, on a quarterly basis? Like, did you have something that you went, oh, here's the thing I got to make sure, so you keep on track?
Yeah. It's amazing. I have what I call the learn matrix.
Okay.
I have a book coming out, Learn, right? And in there's a QR code to part of one of the free offers is you get the matrix. Okay. And so the matrix basically has the letters LEARN on it, right? And it goes across. And what you do is you say, and then over here it says, if there's miscommunication, it goes through a little thing. And if you as a leader can sit and start marking out, as you look at your team, if there's confusion, well, then people aren't listening. If there's hard feelings and you see people not getting along, well, then there might be a respect problem. So it's something you can do as a leader and sit back and you can use this matrix to kind of check off, and it kind of gives you areas that maybe out of those 5 letters you should, if you got a bunch of false starts in projects that you guys are doing, well, guess what? They're not listening, but they're also understanding no. Because for some reason we keep starting and stopping. So there's some communication problems, and then there's some implementation problems. So it kind of walks you through that. And I just call that the learn matrix. And as a leader, you step back and you see what you're getting as a product from your team, and where does it fall into the LEARN, and then that tells you where the stress area is. Maybe again, if we're not communicating well, it may be because our ethics are out of line. So then the matrix takes you through that.
I love that, because you're looking at the reality of the day-to-day and going, what is the root cause of this? Not just what do I see, but like at its core, what do I need to address as a leader? And that is so helpful.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you got to walk in, sit down and say, hey guys, we must have forgotten what we value around here, because I'm seeing a lot of the following. And that's not calling anybody out. And I know we're better than that. So we need to refocus.
Absolutely love that. Jim, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been fantastic. And I would love for listeners to be able to follow you, potentially get your book. Like, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you, get connected with your world?
Yeah, I think right now the best way, I have a website, it's jimcarbaugh.com. I also would say go out to LinkedIn, look me up, and I do, and I'm on Facebook as well, and I'm on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. But I like to do daily, I call them compass checks. I used to tell that with my team, we're going to do a compass check. I'm an old outdoorsman, and if you don't check your compass, I don't care if you can read it or not, you're not going to be, no one walks in a straight line. So you got to keep checking that compass, right? So every day I'll do a compass check, and links into LEARN, obviously. And I mean, I believe it, and I love it. So, yeah, reach out to me in any one of those ways. Go to my website, drop me an email. There's a place there we can connect. LinkedIn, same way, and Facebook. Yeah. More than happy. As you can tell, I love spreading the word. Learn.
Yeah. No, I love it. And the book, do you know when does the book launch?
Well, Amazon is reviewing it right now, so we're hoping if somewhere in June.
Okay. So most likely this will post in the first this episode will go live in the first 2 weeks of June.
Okay.
So if this is just dropped, I will include a link and make sure that people can find access to get the book too. Because
Absolutely great, thank you. And
love it.
Again, if they reach out, I'll be more than happy to share with them the Learn Matrix. I've been told I shouldn't give it away, but it helps people. I think it works.
Yep. I love it. Jim, thank you so much. Appreciate you being part. And for those who are listening, as always, thanks for being here. You can like or love us on any of your podcasting channels. Be sure to follow and listen. Until next time, blessings.